Hi everybody, TheHande here. You might remember that last year I did a Shitty Couch vlog where I reviewed all the movies in the Star Trek film series which starred the main original series cast. That is to say, it's the Star Trek movies 1 through 6. The reason I did that was because I finally got to see Star Trek the Motion Picture, which I had never seen in its entirety before. And as I mentioned in that video, after that, the only Star Trek movie that I had not seen was Star Trek Nemesis. So last week, or a couple of weeks ago, probably from when this video actually comes out, I ordered the Next Generation movies that I was still missing. I actually had Generations before, so that I would finally have the full set of Star Trek movies in my collection, and also so I could finally see Star Trek Nemesis. And now it's time for me to review the Star Trek movies 7 through 10, and I rewatched Generations as well in preparation for this video, just so I'd have a fresh take on it. But I feel I need to already preface this video by just stating out loud the obvious that I'm not really that big of a fan of Star Trek The Next Generation. And that's not because of any inherent dislike I have for the series as a whole. It's more just the fact that I'm not as familiar with it as I am with the original series. I've seen every single episode of the original series, and sure, I've seen a good bunch of The Next Generation, and a couple of episodes of Deep Space Nine, and maybe like an episode and a half of Voyager. But the post-TOS Star Trek universe just has a lot of stuff that I'm simply not that familiar with. And part of the reason is also that I just have never had a chance to really just sit down and watch the entirety of The Next Generation. I do like the main cast as it is, but not nearly as much as the original cast. Although rewatching these movies, I was reminded of just how much I love Data. And because of that, you can probably guess that the ending of Nemesis kind of got me in the feels a little bit. But I'm not prefacing with this, let's finally get to the movies themselves, and we'll start with Star Trek 7 Generations. Now you'll probably think that I like Generations because it's the last movie that features characters from the original series. That's really the only reason why I got it in the first place. But I do have to also be kind of honest and say that Generations, in my opinion, is just not a very good Star Trek movie. It has a lot of good moments in it. Data, in particular, is hilarious. But that first section of the movie that is set in the original series timeline, it was really never one of my favorite scenes. Now, I will say my favorite thing about this movie is the fact that it was the only one that was made while The Next Generation was still going on. And as a result, I much prefer the uniforms that the cast wears in this film versus the ugly DS9 costumes that they wore for the rest of the film series. So this movie obviously has Picard going up against Malcolm McDowell, getting stuck in this weird anomaly known as the Nexus, which nabbed Kirk in the past, and so in the end, Picard and Kirk joined forces to go up against Malcolm McDowell. And that's already kind of my #1 main issue with this movie, is the fact that the bad guy is literally just Malcolm McDowell. He's literally just some dude. He's not really super interesting. I mean, let's face it, the bad guys of the other TNG movies are definitely way more interesting. Now, that's not to say Malcolm McDowell doesn't give the film a little bit of gravitas, because obviously he's a really good actor. But the main plot about him trying to get to the Nexus is kind of what I don't really like about the film. It's literally just a big CG ribbon going through space. Now, like I said, my favorite part about this movie is Data. This is the movie where he puts his emotion chip in, and it has all kinds of unexpected effects. And that's the reason I really like those parts. Data just gets every funny line in the movie. I will also say, I really like the space battle between the Enterprise and the Klingon ship. I think when the Enterprise crash lands on the planet is kind of a cool scene as well. But then, like I said, the opening scene, even though it does still have Scotty and Chekhov in it, is kind of funny, since the new Enterprise seemed to go on a test flight without any of its critical systems in place. And the scene of the tore up part of the ship when Kirk disappears and the other characters think he's dead is kind of moving, but overall it doesn't carry that much weight. And then this movie definitely has one of the worst scenes of The Next Generation. And I will say, every single one of these TNG movies does have that one scene that kind of brings the whole movie to a screeching halt. In this one, it's when Picard goes down and gets his ass kicked by Malcolm McDowell for the first time. The first time. Yes, the director for some reason felt the need to show off just what a big wimp Picard is by having him get his ass kicked, not once, but twice. And during the first time, there's not even any music. in this fight scene. It's probably the least kinetic fight scene from any movie. I'm honestly just stunned at how awful this scene is. The other thing is that I really don't like the way Kirk goes out. I mean, yeah, it's kind of fun when he's punching Malcolm McDowell in the face for a little while, but really, Kirk's death scene in this film is one of the reasons I kind of remember it being a little bit anticlimactic. However, upon rewatching, I was reminded of just how much fun the movie is. It just unfortunately has a couple of really slow moments that kind of drag the whole thing down. Its stakes are a little ambiguous, and I have to be honest, as good of an actor as Malcolm McDowell is, he's just not a very good Star Trek villain. Next up, First Contact, and of course this is most people's favorite of the TNG movies, and I will also admit that this is one of my personal favorites, although not for the reasons you probably think, because, well, here comes the big secret, I never really liked the Borg that much. Really? Your spaceship is a big fucking cube? Are you fucking kidding me? They were that worried about copying Star Trek they couldn't make it a ball or literally any other shape that would make a little bit more sense. Now that said, my main issue with First Contact is that it's a movie that is very heavily tied with the television series lore. That is to say, the first half of this movie almost feels like it's happening in the midst of the series. That in itself isn't a bad thing, and again, if you're a big TNG fan, you might actually enjoy this. But the way how laissez faire the entire Enterprise crew is about going back into the past is something that honestly kind of bothers me. In fact, I'm kind of surprised just how little this movie focuses on the actual First Contact. Cochrane is barely a character in the film. Now, I last saw this movie in the 90s, and I do remember liking it back then. And I did remember a few key scenes from this that I remember liking a lot. But I was just kind of shocked how very little the movie focuses on humans in the past. There's this really disappointing lack of reverence to this very historical moment in the Trek universe. I mean, yes, they did go back in time a little too easily in the original series as well. But really the only time we got any of that feeling of reverence was when Picard was feeling up Cochrane's rocket. And no, that's not a euphemism. Most of the movie really focuses on the Borgs trying to take over the Enterprise, and this is what really, in my view, just displays how really incompetent the Borg are as villains. I mean, it has shades of that T-Rexes can't see things that aren't moving bullshit. But once again, Data is the saving grace. I do think the Borg Queen is kind of a cool villainess, even though in the end it kind of seems like she's just a horny robot who just really badly wants some robot D in her. Most of the action stuff in this movie, however, is pretty cool. Comedy also works really well. And if there's two scenes in this movie that really just kind of made me cringe a little bit, number one is that whole spacewalk scene. Never really liked that one. And number two is when Picard and Lily are arguing about blowing up the Enterprise. But I also have to say that this movie definitely has one of my favorite finales from the TNG films. And a thing that definitely came to mind is that the movie's subtitle really should have been Star Trek: Data Learns the Bro Code. However, all that considered, I think Star Trek Insurrection is my favorite of the TNG movies. I know some people are probably shocked by that because this is widely considered, again, one of the worst movies in the series. But the thing I actually like about Insurrection, weirdly, is that it does feel most like the television series. And yes, admittedly that even goes for some things like the production quality. It does not have the fast-paced action of First Contact, but it's also the shortest of the Star Trek movies, which I'm not knocking. And the other thing that I really like about Insurrection is that it is a self-contained story. Like I said, that's the thing I really don't like about First Contact, is that it just contains too much things that really just tie it too closely to the television series for it to really work as its own standalone movie. Whereas Insurrection's story, setting, and characters really work in that particular setting, and I really like that. Also, this movie has a lot of comedy. Data is obviously in a big role in it, and I really like that. The Sona are a bit of a weirdo. I'm not a big fan of the hanging pieces of skin on their faces. It is kind of cool in a gross kind of way. And inevitably we are revealed the story reason for it as well. The main thing that I kind of hate about this movie is how badly they try to force a romance between Picard and one of the Baku ladies. But this movie is just a whole lot of fun, which is the reason I love it. If it has one kind of awful scene, it's the one that happens in the turbo lift after Picard gets captured. That one just feels like it takes forever. That scene where Picard transports all the Sona off their command bridge into a holodeck is kind of overly convenient, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, this movie also has a really cool finale. when Picard blows up the sonar probe. And yes, okay, that wall definitely just looks like a blue screen that's missing something. But you guys know me, I like the goofy shit in Star Trek, that's why Insurrection really works for me. And then we come to Star Trek Nemesis. Now I will say, Star Trek Nemesis, in my opinion, has easily the best opening of the Next Generation movies. I mean, within a very short amount of time, a lot of crazy shit happens in it. But my problem with it is that it kind of teeters off later on. And I also feel that they kind of squeeze in these very weird story things that just pay off for one scene later on in the film. Like that Romulan guy being able to form a psychic link with Troy. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do think it's good that they actually found something useful for Troy to do in one of these movies. But a Romulan forming a mind link with her just as she's having sex? Yeah, no, I wasn't a fan of that. B4 was a character I don't know how to really feel about. Kind of funny, but didn't really add a whole lot. However, there are a lot of great action scenes in this. Maybe a few too many space battles. I know, this seems kind of a weird thing, because generally I do like the battle scenes in the Next Generation films. Here it just kind of felt like they were going on a little too long. And what of the villain? Well, he's an evil clone of Picard, which makes him just a smidge more interesting than Malcolm McDowell, but not a whole lot. In fact, I really did like the setup of this film because it dealt with the Romulans, which is, you know, a Star Trek race that I'm actually somewhat familiar with. But as the movie went on, Shin-san just did not really rise to the occasion. We had a lot of really boring dialogue scenes between him and Picard. It was a valiant effort. I like the fact that they actually did try to build up his character a little bit. I just feel it didn't really work. And then the biggest spoiler of all, at the end, of course, Data sacrifices himself to save Picard. I gotta say, that one really got me. I don't think a single scene has ever made me both love and hate a movie so much at the same time. Because on one hand, Data's death is very badass. At the same time, like I said, it really did get me in the feels. We're talking about Wrath of Khan levels of feels on this one. Even more so because, you know, there are no sequels to this movie. This is it. That's the end. Data is dead. So on the strength of the opening and the strength of the ending alone, this movie actually rises above Generations for me as a film overall. But I feel that they also fumbled around with it a little bit, so it's not a really coherent film and not one of my personal favorites. Like I said, my personal favorite is Insurrection, but I do like First Contact as well. I'm always going to like the goofy Star Trek stuff more than the kind of super serious, pompous stuff. Which is to say that I don't think First Contact is as serious or as pompous as I was originally fearing. Come to think of it, First Contact actually has a lot of goofy shit that I had completely forgotten about and which I absolutely loved. So, Insurrection is my favorite, First Contact is my second favorite, and I will say a much closer second favorite than when I was talking about the original series. How The Voyage Home is my favorite, and then Final Frontier is my second favorite. Even though Generations, I think, is clearly the worst of these films, I will say it has enough goofy moments to make it memorable at the very least. Until next time, live long and prosper. So there you go. Hope you found that interesting. Until next time, I have the... No, that's He-Man.